Hey, Mark, thank you for coming in. You have such a marvelous career. I mean, you're so impactful, you're so smart in so many dimensions. You definitely execute on actions. You don't sit around. You're always doing something to move the yardstick forward, but on a global basis. So just a really impressive individual across so many different ways. So thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
No, it's great to be here with you, live and in color. And I'm glad that intro was recorded, so now I can keep repeating it to myself.
And for the audience, I often use the term omni-win. This is the gentleman that invented that word. And so the citation goes to Mark.
Well, with a little
Uh,
asterisk, is myself, Ed Martin, one of my partners, started it, and then we took it, and we're rolling. So,
yeah, it's a great word to encapsulate shared value, right? So Mark, my first question, and this is unscripted. It's sort of like, what are those inflection points in your life that made this wonderful person you are today?
flattery will get you everywhere, Stephen. Well, like a lot of people, there's probably a number, but I can name a few for sure. And you know this very well. I ask people all the time who have been influencers in their lives, and my first one was my grandfather, who him and my grandmother and my mom and my aunt were from Kiev, but they came to Canada and grew up in Montreal, and he took me for walks in the park. And when I was about 5, 6, and one day I asked him, I called him Zeta. I said, Zeta, how do you know all these people that you talk to? And he looked at me with his, Ukrainian accent and said, well, one day I smiled at one and they smiled back at me. And then they started talking to me. So I talked back to them. And then somebody else walked by and smiled at us. And all of a sudden, community or type of thing right there. And I understood it as a 5-year-old, but I even understood it even more later, how something as simple as a smile can be influential, and other people, their mental attitude, their physiologically, what something happens when you smile up to a person. And so that was something that it's probably another reason why I talk so much these days too to people. So is because of him. So that was definitely a point that for some reason I always remembered, because he was pretty wise and used to tell us a lot of stories about what it was like growing up Soviet Union and all that. If I can, another one, there's a lot, but another one I remember right now was after Deloitte, I was with this organization in Winnipeg, Canada, and I was involved with the hockey team, the pro hockey team there, and they'd asked me to do something in the community for kids and starting a fan club. And in the first week, we had 3,000 kids signed up for the fan club, and they offered me a position, pretty senior position in marketing. That can also be backed by my finance background. And at the same time, I got offered the position of executive director at Jaycee's International, which is now Junior Chamber, that the world headquarters is in Miami, and that's a nonprofit, at a much lower salary and everything. And every single person, including me, told me that would not be a good career move, going to a nonprofit, different country, etc. Your dream job offer you got to work for a pro hockey team. The only person that told me to take the nonprofit was the president of the hockey team that offered me that job. And he said to me, the money's going to come. It may not be right that you're getting paid less to go there, but you're going to be traveling around the world and you're going to meet leaders and so on and so forth. That's the one you need to take. And first I thought he was testing me to see if I really wanted his job, but it was real. It was really, he cared about me and what was going on. And so that's another one that I recall, to give you a couple of examples.
It's interesting that both of those examples are very human touch centric, right? And there's a sort of element of caring. Because when you smell it, or when you smile at somebody, it's sort of like you're exuding caring, right? It's this sort of outreach or this idea of theory of mind where you're looking at the other person's and their point of view, and by smiling, you can actually impact that point of view. Or this going to this nonprofit, which is very about relationships. And so those are the foundations of what you do. So tell me about your life. So you've talked about some of the inflection points, right? and then you talked about Deloitte a little bit and about some job offers and stuff. But I didn't know this until recently. Or I guess I knew it, but I didn't really think about it. But you're an accountant.
No, wrong. No, you were doing so well when you were describing me before that point. Well, I did get my CPA. I went to McGill, got my CPA in Montreal, and I did that, kind of not really knowing what I wanted to do, but that was a good basis or foundation for any business I was going to go into. And I did join Deloitte. Actually, showing my age, it was actually Touche back then, and then it became Deloitte. And in fact, it was actually Charette Fortier Howie Touche et Compagnie in Montreal, because we had the whole French thing going on. There was another inflection point there. Now that you bring that up, so the first thing they did was they threw me into audit, which I didn't want to go into. And they threw me there. And the first day was with a steel company client. And the CFO was so cool. He had me in his office explaining to me the business. And I'm learning. I'm saying, wow, audit's way better than I thought. And the CFO is talking to me about the business. And the partner came in and said, what are you doing in here? And I think he was mostly ticked off that he probably should have been there talking about the business, and I was supposed to be adding up columns or something, because this is way before, literally, this is really going to sound old, way before computers and everything that was going on. And so I ended up not getting kicked out of there, but I kept getting, the managers, the partners wanted me on different jobs. I was pretty good at what I did. And but there was one partner at Deloitte that saw that I didn't really have a passion for that. It was important. I knew it was important, but that, go back to that human element again, that I was really good. And he noticed it when the CFOs and whatnot were having me in their office talking about business and what I thought and everything. Even as a young kid, I wasn't a visionary or anything, but I just talked about it. And so he started giving me more client relationship type of work to do. And and keeping the relations going, and taking care of clients, and even emceeing events, which you put a microphone in front of me and it's fantastic. And so stuff like that. And golf day was the best, because they gave me permission to make fun of the partners at golf day when I was the MC, even though I had to be careful, but I was young. What did I know? And so that was another partner, though, that really gave me an impact to get exposure with all different types of key clients. And I got to be, work with the Montreal Canadiens hockey team, which is basically a signature client. I don't even know if we made money on it, but it's great in Montreal to have that as a client. And it gave me interesting exposures, though, too. And I'll give you an example, if I may. Northern Telecom at that time, Nortel and Bell Canada were our clients, and I was on them. And in my first year, I was doing some inventories for that company, and then I was in the boardroom of the headquarters, and the CEO of Northern Telecom walked in to say hi to us at Deloitte. And so he said hi, and he actually somehow, they got to me and came over and said hi, and he said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I just did this inventory at your factory down over there, where it is. And the people there are amazing. They know so many things, and they're showing me flip phones and whatnot. This is late 70s. They're showing me flip phones and all these things that aren't even out yet. And they told me, you should see what the government has when you think what we have. And I said, but I just got a sense these people the operational people knew what was going on. And the CEO told me, well, that's interesting. I've never been there. And I was really sarcastic back then. And that same partner told me to mellow on the sarcasm. And I felt like saying, you've never been there? You remember way back, the operational people weren't considered to be on the executive committees of companies. There was the top guys that did it, and they told them what to do. It made no sense to me. These guys were actually there doing it. So I said, well, that's really crazy that he's never been there. 2 or 3 weeks went by. We're still there. Cool guy, cool CEO, and I really appreciated what he did. And I learned from him too. He came back to me specifically, which he didn't have to ever get back to me, and said, you know what, I really appreciate you telling me about that. I did go there and I talked to the people, and we're going to get them included in some of the stuff going on. I don't know, and I don't know if he said, I don't know why we never did that before, but it was something like that. And he thanked me for mentioning that. I didn't think I did anything special, but I was impacted, if you will, by the fact that he took the time to go do that. He took the time and then to come back and tell me what happened. I mean, I was a grunt at Deloitte at that point, as they called us. And he was the CEO. So that was pretty cool. And then let's go on and on. Then I did get recruited to join the largest private real estate developer in Canada. After that, in Winnipeg, Canada. And another interesting experience was, and stop me if I just keep going on. Another interesting experience was, I was always been called by the marketing guys to come in and explain the financial aspects of the deal, and they made way more than me, Stephen. And so finally, I went to the CEO and the CFO. I said, "I can do this, and it'd be nice if I made more money too, considering I'm doing that." So the first place they sent me to was, there's a big Mennonite community there. They sent me out to the Mennonites who were interested in real estate. So this young Canadian Jewish kid that never made this presentation before was sent out to the Mennonites to do it. And one thing in Canada that I love, that we grew up with, was we didn't talk about we need diversity. We just kind of embraced it, that it was cool to be diverse. So I was excited to go out there, and long story short, they taught me something too. I was naively authentic. As I said, when they asked the question, I didn't know the answer. So I don't know the answer. I'll have to get back to you, which is great, because sometimes if you know too much, you're thinking you don't want to BS an answer. When I said I don't know the answer, we ended up making a deal because we just talked humanly about what the aspects are of the deal and this and that and the buying real estate and whatnot and everything. And that was a great experience for me too. And then fast forward, after the story I told you about the offer with the hockey team, I got to travel around the world, meeting, really amazing leaders. And as my kids used to say, some sucky leaders also, and learned a lot about that. I just met some amazing, heads of state and heads of companies in different cultures and different places. And, this, traveling around the world, your eyes open up to things you've never seen before, and you learn. And one thing I learned even back then was there's different types of leadership, different styles of leadership. One way is not 100% right or 100% wrong. How, you have different perspectives, you have different way cultures perceive certain things, and that's interesting. That's exciting to me, rather than we're all the same type of thing. So I did learn that, and then I got into the executive search business, which I've been doing for years. And I'll pause there, because otherwise you're gonna have to clamp me down. I'll just keep going.
You're reflecting on this CEO, and you make a suggestion, and you're surprised the CEO never sort of looked at the operations side in an in-person way, right? And then he takes the time to take a look, and he goes, "Hey, we could use somebody like that, or in that environment, on our executive team or something." But that's common, I think, amongst really good CEOs, right? They're like just regular people, and you can talk to them like regular people, right?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And they don't ivory tower themselves. They're very curious, and they actively want to learn ways to make things better. And you introduced an idea that he didn't even think of. So
Yes.
So he ran an experiment and went there, and he went, "Wow, there's input here I need." Right?
I should have been promoted to partner.
Right. I mean, I'm thinking of Tim Cook. I mean, that's just the way he operates, right? It's a kind of very flat. Everybody talks to each other, because you need that input, and you can get so many insights from just talking to everybody and not isolating yourself, right? And
Yeah.
every experience you talked about is not about isolating a person. It's about integration and listening and being inclusive and getting into a dialogue and being very open in that dialogue. So that's kind of like your secret sauce, right?
Absolutely. It's not, my friends in Miami say they're not going to hire you for your good looks, so you better bring something else to the table. But you're right. And if you recall, it was different eras too, where they weren't as if you will, and you can never say about all, they weren't as open, authentic. It was had the executives up on the top floor and so on. And but it just never occurred to me, how could you leave operations out? These guys are building this stuff. They got to,
Right.
you got to be talking to them. And I interviewed a CEO probably about a year ago that told me he's having the best time being a CEO because he's able to be emotional, he's able to be vulnerable, he doesn't have to pretend to know everything, and he can trust people because he saw that trusting people, number one, gave them the opportunity to shine, and the ones that were the cream of the crop did shine and they moved up. And I thought it was brilliantly simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's just being respectful of everybody, right? And listening, active listening is really important. So you have this traditional accounting background, and was it your parents or something, or your family that got you into that area? I mean, being an accountant, it's kind of it's not considered, I don't know, at least in the people I work with, they don't think of accounting as an exciting profession. But maybe it is, right?
It's massively exciting. What are you talking about? No, I'm not, I don't define my first. So I did get my CPA, or we used to call it a CA, where they changed to chartered accountant, as a great foundation for business. And it was, going to Deloitte was a great experience just by
what got you in accounting? Was it what got you interested in doing an accounting? Like, you got a commerce degree probably, and then you went into accounting, right?
Yeah, I got a commerce degree, and I wasn't sure if I really like science. I like biology a little bit. I didn't see that happening. I do like sociology and all that, but I wanted to be in business too. So was that the right direction to go into? So, and you bring up a great point. It was a major in accountancy, but it was a bachelor's of commerce. So that was a little bit different, even maybe by name, but also we were able to take certain courses that were about business a little bit more and stuff like that. Although I do remember taking computer classes, another way to show age. And back then there was the big computer room, if you remember, and we had to use the cards and the key punch cards. And God forbid you drop the whole stack of cards before you brought it to the big computer. It was like, oh my God. So yeah, times have changed, but that was the main reason. Not really my parents. My parents didn't have college education, but didn't have a lot of money, never owned a home, the whole bit, and yet we had a really loving family. It's really funny how the whole caring part sticks through everything. And bringing that to business became really important to me, and to sports. I have been very active in sports, playing hockey, coaching sports, coaching kids, and it's all the same. It's all the same. Leaders are leaders, and players that make an impact are players that make an impact, and so on.
So your big jump out of being in the accounting field was then working for the nonprofit, or what was that big juncture?
Well, I was recruited to the largest private real estate developer in Winnipeg.
Right.
And that was great, because it also got me to be at a higher level position with the Jaycees in Winnipeg. When the pro team asked me about doing a fan club for kids and getting kids involved, and I love working with kids, so that was a big play. And because of that, you see, funny how you never know how things are going to happen. Because I was asked to do this fan club for kids and did it in the Jaycees organization, the Jaycees World Headquarters ended up noticing me more. They won a national award for a kids program or whatever it was. It got me an offer with the pro hockey team at the same time. And all of a sudden I had to make a decision. And you never know how things are going to happen, but what's that expression? When the window opens up, jump into it, or whatever, take advantage of opportunities. And a funny story, actually, when I was in Winnipeg, or actually when I'm in Miami a little bit later, and I was looking at this young man's resume. Speaking of learning things, I was looking at this young man's resume, and he told me he didn't really have much experience. He was late 20s or something, didn't really have much experience and whatnot. And then I looked at the last line on his resume, and it said Santa Claus Parade. And funny enough, I was the first Jewish guy to run the Santa Claus Parade in Winnipeg, Canada, by the way. Big credentials there. However, I said, well, what did you do at the Santa Claus Parade? And he said, well, I had to talk to the city. I had to get permits, I had to get sponsorship. I had to figure out what's going to happen if it rains. The sponsors we had to get were arguing about which part of the parade they were in and how big their floats were, and this and this and that and that. And I had to do budgets, and I had to do this and that. And he said, yeah, I guess you really don't have any experience. And so the reason I bring that up is that was another learning mode there about the accounting helped me understand financials in small companies and big companies when I was at Deloitte, which allowed me the opportunity to get recruited to that great company there, which then allowed me also, because of my experiences coaching and stuff, to do that fan club for the pro hockey team, which was super fun and super impactful, which then led to another opportunity of going down to the Miami headquarters of Jaycee's. So the moral of the story is kind of like where we are right now. You know, you can make a way better economic impact when you're making a social impact at the same time. It was happening to me, even though I didn't know it, just being involved in good projects.
But isn't it, you know, you're doing a commerce degree, but don't you do marketing courses as part of your commerce degree?
Thank goodness. If I just did accounting courses, it would have gone bananas. Yeah, there was marketing. There was even, you know, marketing biz dev type of stuff. There was some entrepreneurship in there, not as much as today, but some of that. And there was also
organizational behavior. There'd be organizational org behavior in there, HR courses, right?
I don't know if there was much HR, but there was behavioral stuff, because we also had to take sociology, which I was happy about, because that got into that and so on. But we also had the opportunities of doing projects like stock market projects, you know, where it's all, you know, pretend, if you will, but to do that. And some of the, you know, it depends on there's leaders in teaching too. Depends on the really good ones gave us projects like that to work on. They introduced us to business people in the community to talk to and things like that. They didn't have to do that, but they cared. And so they did do it. And so, you know, that's why. So yeah, so don't call me an accountant. And
but this Jaycee job was really pivotal for you, right? Because you traveled. Tell me a little bit more about that, and then we'll get into your search journey, right? So
yeah, sure. That was maybe the best job I've ever had for the least amount of money I ever made, actually. Which is unfortunate, because that should never happen. People should be valued, period. But I did get to travel around the world, almost everywhere, and met, you know, the head of Goldman Sachs in London, met the president of South Korea, met different people all over the place, and a lot of interesting people that no one would ever know, but they're doing amazing things. And you know, what Jaycee's did was they taught leadership development through community development, in effect. Projects all around the world, some that were international based, some that were local based. And we learned how to lead, whether it was the fan club for kids that I did in Winnipeg. That was a project that I brought into Jaycee's to do it for the team. And just as I said before, learning and seeing how different leaders acted. And you know, some were louder, some were quiet, some were this, some were that. You can't say one's right or one's wrong, and it's how they did it, when they did it, and you know, and how they, you know, got consensus, but then made decisions after getting consensus, and were able to do it, even though not everybody consensus, but not everybody was aligned with everything like that. And so and then, you know, experiencing, you know, different meals with people. You know, a lot of stuff happens over meals, right? Right. And that social and engagement, and learning, you know, how proud they are of certain foods that they have, and the traditions, and where it comes from, and how it's prepared. You know, there's a lot to be learned from where things are derived from too, including languages where they're derived from, and food where it's derived from, traditions and things like that, because it's and this is something I really believe in, it's a belonging thing, right? It's a belonging thing where people are proud of and they want to share what they have with you, etc. And you've got to be able to accept what they want to share, which sounds so simple, but it's important because it's important to the people that are sharing what they're offering to you. When they bring you into, I've been brought into in homes around the world, they bring you into your home, into their home. That's a big time compliment when they bring you into their home and share stuff, and you meet the kids and whatever. So, you know, it's taught me a ton, not only about leadership and business, but also, and you know this, people, we all have differences and we're all diverse, but we're all the same at the same time. And this is a line that's been said a million times. We all want the same thing, you know, for ourselves, for our family, etc. And with everything going on in the world right now, most people, 90% want peace and just have a great life. And so, yeah.
You've learned all of these leadership lessons. And in fact, from the very moment we started this interview, you talk about characteristics of people and interesting people and ones that can be leaders, and you know, and there's management and there's leadership, and you could write a book.
Good idea. You want to help?
I mean, and because now we can segue into your search business, because that's about leadership too, right? Finding leaders and things like that. So how did you get into the search business?
I was actually noticed by an Ernst and, I don't know if it was Ernst and Young or Ernst and Winnie at the time, but let's go with Ernst, partner when I was at Jaycee's, and somehow or other introduced me to what was then going to become my partner in a relatively new search firm that we started, because he again, some of the notices, leaders are amazing at noticing, whether it's sports or business, noticing a characteristic or two of people that's outstanding or differentiating. And so he noticed something in me, whatever that was, that he introduced me to this fellow to really grow what he thought was a big need at that time in Miami, but even beyond, but finding great talent. I mean, I was working executive director of a global leadership development organization. And so he tied that in with, we need someone that can identify those people and bring them to our companies to grow. I didn't grow up saying, boy, I want to be a headhunter when I grow up, type of thing. And not to be redundant, but he cared enough to actually think about that when he saw me, and they were our auditors at Jaycee's at the time. And so we did meet, and he was a one-man thing doing his own little search firm, and we came together and partnered and grew the firm. And I'd done some recruiting at Deloitte, because they again, I was related to me getting into other things and whatnot, but never into search or anything. And so, and it was a different era again too. This was like late 80s on type of deal. And so we just hit it. And sometimes ignorance is bliss, even in business. And you just calling people and saying, what do you, at the beginning, like, what do you need? What type of talent do you need and whatnot? And we started out with contingency, which is you only get paid if you fill the spot, and everybody's running around like maniacs, resumes all over the place. And if you want to beat another firm to get the resume of Joe or Jane over somewhere, and there's no email, boy, we're going to sound really old here. There was no email. Faxing had just come in. And so sometimes you couriered or brought personally the resume over to a company, so you'd be the first one to get it there, which I thought was ridiculous, by the way. And I'm thinking that people are just throwing resumes at companies without vetting them properly, without anything, just because that was the incentive. If you didn't get it there first, you didn't get the fee if that person was hired. And what way to make money? You're hoping to hire your person. You do all this work and stuff for that. So I quickly changed to, without knowing the practice per se, we quickly changed to, we should be retained to find you the best people, because that gives, first of all, that represents our clients way better, that they are committed to not just finding bodies, they're committed to do this properly. They're committed to be presented properly, taking the time for us to know who they are, not just the company, but who they are and what's the type of company they are and whatnot, which was really not happening. I mean, it's happening now, but how many years did it take for this feeling to happen. And that got us clients because, here we go again, we really cared about the client and who they were. We could find the qualifications for any job. Like, by the way, my longest search was 13 months for an SEC attorney with a company. And that was quite a search. But, we learned and we showed the clients that we really cared about them and who they were as people and what they were doing and where they were going, which allowed us to share that with the best candidates who saw that we weren't just trying to sell them a job per se. And it evolved pretty quickly, into that. And it is also a much, in some ways easier thing because you're not whipping resumes all over the place, wasting a client's time with crappy resumes, but you're sending them because just in case that person's good, you want to get paid for it. You're sending the right people over. It sounds crazy now, but at that time, that's what was going on. And, the big firms, Korn Ferry's and not, were also fairly young in doing what they were doing. And so, that really helped us, grow significantly. And, started out in accounting and finance. That was our expertise. But then we went to IT and HR, et cetera, et cetera. And really in a way that we were able to take care of the whole client. And so when they did retain us for CFO job, they knew that we could represent them well, even though we weren't expert in marketing, but we would represent them well to go find the best marketing person. And then we grew with other people, and that's part of the foundation of where I am now. But we started just in Miami, and then it grew and grew and grew to do searches all over the place. And it was fun because we saw, and this is before any conversations, I believe, of impact. When we had a candidate and their family send us whatever, a bottle of wine, or thanked us or whatever, for finding them that opportunity that kind of changed their life, if you will, not to sound too dramatic, but an opportunity that really changed their life. And especially, even for big companies, but especially when we placed a great person in a smaller company that made big time impact of that smaller company, that was cool. That was really cool that, we were making a difference with people. Again, not just putting a unit into a job and getting paid for it.
Okay, now let's bring us up to today. Tell me what you're doing today in your search business, and then businesses and nonprofits that are related to your search business. So start with your core. How have you changed and transformed in your search business today, and where do you want to see it go in the next few years? And then you do so much on the impact space, and then we'll talk about how that sort of merges and integrates with your search business.
Cool. Well, when I was doing my search business, I met one of our partners at a U.S. Chamber Foundation event that we both ended up going to, and we just started talking. And he was a big corporate guy, had been with Coke and Hershey's and Ford and whatever. And the conversation just went to how he's using marketing dollars to impact the community and the economics of the company. And they're having trouble building teams to do that. So the conversation started, and you got the talent part, I got the talent part, they got the impact part. There's something here that we should be talking about to be able to do that. And the conversation went pretty quickly. I was at the time with an international firm that had recruited me, even though I didn't want to go necessarily, recruited me to help grow the LA office. And I said, at that point, I had trademarked the term leaders who care. And I said, I want to take this firm under that premise that we work with leaders who care. And they said, yes. And I did the first global conference recognizing leaders who care, both companies and individuals. And of which one of our common mutual good friends, Stephen Hecht, was actually a recipient of back then. But then that other firm, and I'm on my way back here, the other firm started having problems with the word care. They said it was too intimate for business. It was too this, it was too that. And I would tell them, if you think this is intimate care, you're going to go crazy when I start using the word love. What are you going to do then? Type of thing. So sold that. We joined together and we created it was just perfect timing. And also, you know, when you look back, you see the threads, and this is where I'm supposed to be type of thing now. And we launched Fifth Element Group as an impact advisory, impact consultancy, and we launched it at the UN headquarters in New York about 5.5 years ago on International Women's Day, because one of the first things we did was we had a Decade of Women initiative, which was after SDG 5 and empowering women. One of the first things we did was we were in India doing a consortium for women, young women entrepreneurs and stuff like that. And we decided to come together on that. And it was super exciting because I always was kind of doing impact, but we were just a search firm, and to be able to put a search firm together with making an impact, and it's the infinity thing, Stephen, where if companies are making an impact, a social impact, environmental impact, whatever, and they're doing properly, we can talk about that, then you're able to represent our clients truly as leaders who care, with proof that they really do care, not just, of course we care. You know, we have a potluck dinner every 6 months, or we, open door policy to resolve conflict and stuff. But then we're able to attract the really best players, who are everything from diverse to experts in whatever, but they want to both make money and make a difference and have purpose at the same time. They don't want to, kind of like when I went to the nonprofit, took a big pay cut. They don't want to have to give up one for the other. How can we make money and make a difference at the same time? The only way to attract those best people is to show them that the leaders really do care about them being able to do that. They do care about, like, women ask me all the time, minorities especially too, women will say, I got the qualifications, I can do the job. Are they really going to let me be involved in their most significant projects? Are they really going to let me be engaged, make mistakes, come back, get recognized for it? And great questions that the ones who really are authentic will know how to answer those questions to the candidates, and that helps us attract them. So without going roundabout ways, that became the foundation for something that I love doing now, where it's we can combine both of those.
So describe some of your current projects that has this sort of omni-win integration of social impact, but also helps initiatives and so on. What are some use cases?
Sure. Well, one of the ones we did during the pandemic, let's start with that one, was with what's it called again? John Krasinski, Some Good News. And during the pandemic, he started this on YouTube, and it went ballistic all over the place, because people wanted good news and everything. And they were looking for companies to join in, and we brought in Coca-Cola for just over like $3 million, where a lot of that money was geared towards exposure of what's happening in the hospitality industry, and also with Guy Fieri, money going to the employees in the hospitality industry that needed money because everything going on there. We also brought Starbucks in. Merchandise was sold with Starbucks and everything, also to help make an impact for people that really needed help, and brought positive exposure to those companies for doing something good, and to that platform, and to the hospitality industry and everything. So that was a combination. And in a sense, working with talent, that was in search, but we were working with talented people in the industry that needed help at that time, for that. Some of the other things, for example, we're working, we have a whole, most of the time we get retained by corporates, family offices, foundations and whatnot, to either create a strategy or amplify their strategy of whatever impact they want to make. And then you mentioned omni-wins before. The omni-wins we create we put corporate A with corporate B, with entrepreneur, with innovator, maybe with the UN, maybe Davos, maybe Nobel, whatnot, to really make a bigger impact on it and for a good ROI. One of the projects initiatives we co-founded was around food security, which is a big problem, as you know, and creating the 100 billion meal challenge. And we brought in Tony Robbins as a co-founder. Forbes came in. The first night at the Forbes dinner, they had never done that for one cause. 5 billion meals were pledged at that first night. And now we're up to 70 billion meals. Many of that has gone to women farmers in Africa and whatnot. But it's a 10-year initiative, excuse me, where we're hoping to get to the 100 by November, at which point there'll be another big public announcement. But at that point, we're working with World Food Program and others on really going after all the innovations that are out there that World Food Program, Bernard, et cetera, does really well, but expanding on that to try to change the ecosystem, to make it the supply chain better, et cetera, et cetera. So with respect to that, we're able to do searches for companies in that industry also, because of the exposure that we get and they get, et cetera, whether it's heading up a farm or education or whatnot. There's all different types of positions, or the standard ones like CEOs, CFOs. We worked during that time with a Japanese headquartered company. That U.S. headquarters was here in actually in LA, and the CEO came in to transform everything. And then we brought in the CHRO, did searches for the CTO, et cetera. And our experience in the food industry in general, but especially because of what we were doing that was important, I think differentiated us than just a regular search firm type of deal. And part of that is the big community we have, the relationships we have by doing these impact projects as well, to bring in people like yourself and other people with expertise and relationships to make that impact. We even bring people from our community onto search teams for their expertise. So you don't just have search people with experience, but you have people that are experienced in specific. I'm going to give you another example. We did 2 searches for perfusionists. Do you know what a perfusionist is?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
We didn't have a clue what a perfusionist was, by the way. So we're really proud. We got 2 searches for perfusionists, not knowing what the position was about, but the client really knew how we would represent them well. Perfusionists are people that have specialized medical technology training in cardiovascular surgeries and lung transplants and stuff like that. Whoever thought an accountant would do that search, right, Stephen? But this client, which we had known for a while, major hospital healthcare system, again, liked the way we presented them and knew that we could identify and have the depth of relationships to find those people. It was more important, however, to be able to attract and secure them as to why this is a great opportunity for them. The qualifications, you can figure it out. And the client should know the qualifications even better than us, hopefully. But that's some of the unique stuff that we work on there. And with that same client, we're working on health equity, issues and opportunities as well. And bringing some of our clients in. We have one client that through retinal therapy and AI is able to identify diabetes and maybe stop the progression of diabetes. So full circle, working with that client on perfusionists and health equity, bringing this client in that does work in health equity to bring that to the underserved areas and so on. And I'll give you another quick example. We do a lot of work in untapped talent, and untapped talent are people that didn't go to college for whatever reason, formerly incarcerated people, veterans, refugees, a huge part of our population that should be valued and not looked down upon as not having this degree or that degree or whatever. And we have a couple of clients, one that's called Workbay that has a whole educational platform for years on everything from tech to retail to carpentry and welders to supply chain to being caregivers to people with disabilities, you name it. And there's skills training with credentials. And then we match that with corporates who are looking for skills, skills like that. And then we have another one, Fusion Cyber, that has a whole educational platform on skills training for cyber, all the way up to top secret. There's hundreds of thousands of cyber jobs, and not everybody has to be a computer person to do some or all of those cyber jobs. So that's brought us into bringing a major think tank last week, a major think tank together with a major university in Miami, together with this cyber educational company, to start working together on bringing it to their students and doing new research projects. And searches just come out of that all the time because of it. And the participation of people in our community like that come together makes an impact like you never could before.
So I got 3 more questions. How did you get involved with KIN and what do you do with them? That's the Knowledge Impact Network. The next one is Million Peacemakers. How did you get involved and what are you doing with them? And then your final recommendation. So that's the final 3 and the remaining few minutes. So first of all, KIN.
Well, yeah, I mean, great organization. In fact, I believe you may have introduced me to the chairman, Alain Chetry, who I love because I can practice my French with him. And shared to me what it was at that time, the Knowledge Pledge, now Knowledge Impact Network. And they're truly making an impact with the most amazing product, knowledge, and bringing that knowledge to social entrepreneurs that can make a difference in the world. So, we were more than happy to support them on finding their CEO, which we found. And that was an honor to do that, a privilege to do that because of the impact they're making, and who they are. And again, going back to the lady that we placed there was so thankful to have that opportunity because it was a unique opportunity. It wasn't just another job. And it's just cool. It's just cool. And so that's how, and we're excited about continuing that relationship as they evolve also as an organization. So that was that one. And then Million Peacemakers. Well, this one of my favorites by a long shot. I got to meet the chief peacemaker, Stephen Hecht, who was introduced to me. I was doing a search and I was calling a guy that runs family offices in Toronto, and we were talking, and he said, "You need to meet this guy in Montreal." And that was Stephen. And I said, "What is he doing?" "He's in peace." I said, "Good. One of my favorite topics is peace, but also a lot of people talk about peace." And what does that mean? So I actually went to meet Stephen. Actually, first Stephen and this guy that referred me to him came down to LA, and we talked, and we spent the whole day together talking and this and that and other. Then myself and my 2 youngest boys went up to Stephen and took Nonflict, which is their signature program, together to see what it was like. And my kids were able to air all the conflicts they had with me. It was awesome. But I was impressed because that same partner at Deloitte, that was an inflection guy, if you will, once told me brilliance is simple. He said, it might be a complicated path, but brilliance is simple. And Nonflict is a brilliantly simple way to look at conflict differently, by a process, by a way of doing it, that you don't have to hate somebody over a conflict. It just means you have different ideas and how we're going to get to where we want to go together. So I was really impressed, and have been excited about offering it to all types of people, but even corporate leaders, and especially in today's world, we're bringing it to corporate leaders in the aspect of, because a lot of them are asking us, what do we do now? What do we say with all this going on? How's it going to affect business, et cetera? And we've recommended to them, maybe the best thing you can do as a leader who cares is to talk to your employees and say, we have a workshop that I think would be great for all of us to take, to learn how to, not that we don't know how, but to learn how to better engage with each other and resolve conflict. And what we have found, Stephen, in recruiting is that people ask us, if there's issues, how do they resolve it? And the company that actually has a program to do it versus saying we have an open door policy to do this wins that candidate, because they show they're actually doing it, even though they may not know what the program is yet. And we talked to them about Nonflict. So we're excited about the program we're doing with them now, obviously on Peacemakers Make Peace, and how that's going to help commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, and how we're going to go out and train at least 1 million young people to, if you will, not to use an overused word, create a movement of people all the time, whether we know it or not. And it's our choice to do it either positively or negatively, because it can happen in a second that you may not even know how you impacted somebody, or it can happen over a lifetime. But why not take the path where you're positively influencing them and really care about them and smile? You know, they say it takes less muscles to smile than frown. So what do we do? So that's the simple message I would put out there, and check out Nonflict, because it's awesome in that whole package. And so
thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.